Jeez, you already know what it is. Myself, Omega Axel, aka Unepa, back once again, putting in the ancestors' work. What's good? Wagwan. What's going down for the live and locked in fam? Peace and more powers to each and every single one of you who've been able to tune in. I really appreciate your time, your attention, and your focus. I also just have to say a big Black African heart-filled thank you to each and every single one of the Patreon supporters. I really appreciate your likes when you share the content and you're telling your friends and family about where you got the content. So Dua, that's Medu Netcha, for thank you. This presentation, which we're about to get into today, is just a very small insight to some of the work which I'm going to be engaged in over the next 12 to 18 months or so, going in and out of the schools and on a private circuit as well. And I'm going to be utilizing a blueprint which was created and given to us by one of the great minds of the international Black African community, Joel Augustus Rogers. And what I'm going to be doing is merging ancient history with contemporary history and utilizing it as a tool to positively engage with the rising generation, to educate and empower them about the abundance of Black excellence which we're all connected to. Now, I know I've mentioned rising generation there, but I don't want to exclude any age groups because we've all been so misinformed and so miseducated that this presentation and the information and the work that comes as a byproduct from it are going to serve as a good basis or a good foundation for anybody to understand Black excellence and just how far that goes. But it also serves this presentation as some promotion for, especially the work that I'm doing at the moment. I'm about to release a new book, which is in tribute to the life and works of J.A. Rogers. It's out on the 12th of the 12th, so the 12th of December. And it's just as much a tribute to the international Black community and the excellence that we all exhibit in every social, professional and academic field so naturally. And I want it to be as engaging and as effective and interactive and as inclusive as I possibly could. So I've covered a wide variety of topics in this new book, which is going to serve as a crash course, if you will, for the whole family into kind of Black African history and their contributions, or our contributions, to world evolution and world progression. It also can be a tool in the sense that I've provided quite a lot of additional content to go with it as well, like quizzes, there's reading lists, there's lesson plans, literally hours worth of lesson plans and creative activity ideas. So you can actually go to Amazon and pre-order that, or you can contact me directly and we can talk about how I can get you a copy. But one thing I want to make clear as well, just from the jump, is that Black excellence is not just a material status. It's not just a world record. It's not just a business achievement. It's actually rooted in all of our history. Okay, history builds the present. Okay, and from the present moment, we build and create the future. So it's important that we go forward knowing that the legacy that we're continuing has always been steeped in deep spirituality, profound wisdom, scientific breakthroughs, engineering genius, natural beauty and innovation. Okay, Black excellence also thrives under the notion of common unity, okay, or community. And I believe that it is, and I believe a lot of you that will be listening to this right now will believe that it is important that we work together wherever and whenever we possibly can. Okay, so with that thought in mind, I've decided that 50% of the proceeds and 50% of the profits that are going to be made from the sale of the new book will be donated indefinitely to the We Will Rise Together project, which is all about building schools in Jamaica and Ghana. So just know that by supporting the new work, you're going to be supporting a lot of people across the world as well in the Black African community who actually need our assistance and need our help from our privileged place. But without any further ado anyway, the mission objective for today, very, very simple, okay? This presentation, very simply, is going to be split down into 4 parts because I don't just want to ramble for an hour straight just hitting you with fact after fact after fact, okay? I also want to make it very clear again that this is not my work, okay? This is the work of J.A. Rogers, one of the international Black community's greatest minds. He produced over 39 different publications and works for the Black community. So this presentation is based on 100 amazing facts about the Negro. And the reason that I decided to do the presentation is because many of our community's great works are being forgotten and lost to time. And some of these works were and still are the foundational spark that ignited the internal revolution that sparked a lot of people to fight the good fight and preserve and restore African communities' history and culture and condition and right to self-preservation. So it's important that we remember certain works which are helping shape the minds of people who go on to lead great communities, on to do great things, which are examples for other people to follow. Okay. I also feel like through the intentional and or unintentional misinformation which is taught to our youths in the educational system, it leaves a lot of Black African Caribbean people in a state of confusion and at a loss to positively place themselves in the future. So I believe it's massively important to be able to showcase and present, especially to the rising generation, successful people who aren't just in positions of them in the media, rappers and sports stars. Okay, they need to know that they have a place in the academic field, in the justice system, and all of these different pillars of society. Okay, so today we're going to be covering very briefly who is J.A. Rogers. Okay, we're also going to cover why he utilized the term Negro, and then we're also going to just very quickly cover 25 facts about the Negro which were put out 80 years ago. So first thing I'll say very quickly, peace and more powers, Uncle Jarseneb, resonate in peace, rest in powers, Joel Augustus Rogers. Okay, Ashe. This biography was not written by me. This was copy and pasted from blackpast.com. You can go there and the source is on there in just a moment. And I don't want to go through all of this line for line on the basis that through my own research, which I'm going to obviously be uncovering over the next couple of weeks, some of the information is incorrect. So I just want to build an idea in your mind as to what he did, why he was important, and why I decided to obviously bring him back to the forefront of the Black community's minds. So he was a self-trained historian, novelist, and journalist, a little bit like myself, except for I'm not a journalist. I don't think any papers would publish me like that. Joel Augustus Rogers spent the majority of his life debunking the pseudoscientific and racist depictions of people of Black African ancestry, and he began to popularize their history amongst other people and amongst Black people across the world. He was born September the 6th, 1883 in Jamaica. He had a couple of siblings. His mother died whilst he was young, and he was raised by his father, who was Samuel John Rogers. In 1906, he emigrated to the United States and eventually, after some time, found himself living in New York City. One of the jobs which he had, which was massively important in his earlier life, he worked as a Pullman porter, which was basically he worked as a porter on a train. So he was able to travel up and down the country. He had access to various different libraries. He was exposed to various different people, different mindsets, and it set him on it helped nurture his journey to get him where he wanted to be, so to speak. Eventually, he did find his niche as a journalist and as a historian. I imagine at this point he must have realized that his calling, or felt like his calling, was to research, disseminate, and educate Black African people about their history, which they'd been bamboozled about. So he began to combat the white racist propaganda in history because he was noticing that Africans were just being portrayed as savage or not having much history. So he wanted to combat that and let people know that, you have a glorious history. And we can see that in the white writings, because what we have to remember as well, a large majority of the sources that he would have been dealing with in this period of time would have been European sources. But anyway, to that end, in 1917, he published his first work, which is considered to be his seminal work, so his most influential work in regards to his ongoing works. And it was called From Superman to Man. And in this, it's a novel as well, so it's a story, it's not a non-fiction book, okay? But in this story, a black person is riding one of the trains, and he is in a conversation or a debate or an argument with a racist Southern senator, and throughout the dialogue, various different ethical and moral principles, ideas and concepts are all brought into question, and it allows the reader to understand that a lot of these racist notions are actually straight up ignorant. But anyway, as I mentioned, Rogers went on to publish over 39 publications in total, one of them being 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, which he republished again in the 60s, I believe. I think it was 1964, 2 years before he died. But by the 1930s and 1940s, Rogers was writing history columns in various different leading black newspapers, including the Pittsburgh Courier, the Messenger, the Crisis, Mercury, and he was also writing for the New York Amsterdam News. And he was the one thing that's very special about J.A. Rogers is he was one of the only black wartime correspondents during World War II. And one of the highlights of his career is he was actually present at the coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia in 1930. And he also covered the Italo-Ethiopian, I nearly said war, but it wasn't a war, because what the Italians did was, outright wrong. And he did that. Sorry, he was representing the Pittsburgh Courier when he did that. Now, what I really like about J.A. Rogers and what I relate to him on is on the level that he's self-trained. Okay, he had no formal education. He didn't go to university and acquire certificates and degrees and these things here. I'm not shunning the importance of these, but he just goes to prove that you're able to succeed without that acknowledgement. So he was widely recognized for his professionalism, his excellence, and his intellectual ability to converse and to portray his ideas. He was a part of various different international societies, such as the French Society of Anthropology and the Geographical Society. He was multilingual as well, spoke Italian, French, Spanish, obviously English and German. Even to this day, J.A. Rogers is still kind of unacknowledged for the amount of work that he did. As I said, that he published 39 works in total, various different articles, in fact hundreds of different articles which you can find online. But just to give you an idea about some of the books that he was writing and some of the messages that he was portraying, is we've got Ethiopia and the Origin of Civilization, we have the Ku Klux Spirit, we have Your History in Color. But the next point that I want to cover very simply is, when I recommend people to read 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, people hold a screw face at me and they show a particular misunderstanding about both the term and the author's use of the word. Okay, in fact, most of us, even to this day, to this point right now, are still intentionally misinformed about the historical and linguistic origins of the word. And on top of that, I'm sure when we think of the word Negro, the first thing that comes to our mind is suffering, pain, slavery, chains, lynching, police brutality, civil rights struggle, all of these different things. And that there is the stereotype that we need to overcome. Okay, there's a very simple quote: whoever controls the image controls the definition. Well, we for too long as African people have allowed other people, non-African people, to dictate the definition and meanings of our words. Okay, now let me just make it very clear before I explain this. This is sourced from Wikipedia. This is not what I have as a definition for the word Negro, but this just goes to show the level of misinformation. Okay, so the word Negro is used in the English-speaking word to refer to a person of black ancestry or appearance. It has been used for people of African ancestry as well as people of other places. The word Negro means black in Spanish and Portuguese. It comes from the Latin niger, which means black. Negro replaced the term colored as the more polite term. This was done when the term black was more offensive. The use of the word was accepted as normal until the civil rights movement in the late 1960s. It was accepted by people that it was often used to describe. So basically, he's saying people like Martin Luther King were happy to accept the term Negro. Okay. During the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, some African American leaders, such as Malcolm X, decided that Negro had too much of a negative connotation and was too linked to slavery, segregation, and Jim Crow and all of these discriminative policies and societal behaviors, that he didn't want to use the word Negro. Now, to anyone who's ever bothered to dig into this and look further into the word Negro, they would know that J.A. Rogers was very intelligent and utilized the phrase very carefully when he decided to call his book 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro. Bear in mind first and foremost that in 1934, when the book was published, Negro was the politically correct term and it wasn't offensive, unless it was used in an offensive context, of course. But because of society and consequently by environment, even a large amount of the black society had become brainwashed by the irrational, illogical, and unintelligible justifications given for such things as the Ma'afa, which is the Black Holocaust, which is the transatlantic slave trade, Jim Crow laws, segregation, lynchings, etc., etc. Okay, all of these irrational, illogical, and unintelligible justifications were justified and held under the umbrella of these people were Negroes, so it doesn't matter, we can lynch them, we can segregate them right here. And as you can see by some of the images on the bottom there, this is the type of propaganda that we're dealing with at the turn of the century around blacks never relax. Yeah, chop balls. So the fact that Rogers used this word, he was standing in defiance of an agenda which was happy to desecrate a word which carries so much historical value and cultural value and world advancing scientific, medical, agricultural, and universal knowledge. He was basically throwing up a middle finger to society. Okay, and the book in contemporary terms clearly sets out to be a catalyst which sparks the reader to reevaluate their assumptions based on the negative stereotypes which was built around Negroes and blacks in America. So it ultimately serves as a crash course for black excellence and achievement during a time when history for black people was almost non-existent. The only history that they had or that they were aware of was pretty much in chains. And also remember that these people during the 1930s would have been raised by the first generation freshly released from slavery. So to have this would have been massively empowering for the people. And I understood when I first read the book just what J.A. Rogers was kind of intending to do, and it really resonated with me. I thought it was really important what he was doing. You have to remember as well, at this period of time, 1934, 3,363 people, or around that number, had already been lynched in Jim Crow America. So for him to be telling black people, now, listen, don't be ashamed and be embarrassed about your history and your culture, you actually come from greatness, massively powerful. So the first fact that I want to deal with, in fact, actually, before we even get into it, to actually save time on this presentation, to save me going fact by proof, and having you sit here all day, is what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through the full fact, and I will skim through and mention selected bits of proof, and I will give you plenty of time to be able to pause the video, or you'll be able to come back to it at a later time and obviously take your notes and do your further research. So fact number one deals with the issue which we were just dealing with, because as I said, people who have cared to do the research and look into these types of things will know that the word Negro is not actually an offensive term. It actually is a term which is an African term, but we've been told different. So the most ancient of names for so-called black people are Nahisu, or Nubian, Ethiopian, and more from ancient Egypt, and Negro or Negrita from West Africa. All of the above are native African words. Negro is probably the oldest, as Negritos are the oldest known human branch. Okay. I'll also just point out at this stage here as well, we also have to respect and understand that this information was the information available to him in the 1900s. Okay. We now have much more information to know that, for example, the word Nubian is not an ancient term. It's actually a term which was coined in the 7th century by Arab traders who noticed that the people of northern Sudan and lower Kemet were wealthy in gold, or Nuba, and there we go. So that's a 7th century term. So we have to just respect that information was relative to this day and age, this period of time. Nehisu, I'll also point out as well, was the term that the people of ancient Kemet, the Bremech, utilized for the people of Kush. Okay. The fact that I want to just highlight is that, I think it's actually on the first page, second page, is W.M. Leake, who says, with regard to the origin of the word Niger, more than one celebrated writer fallen into the error of supposing that Niger is a Latin word. Okay, so the reality of the situation is that the word Niger was actually adapted into the Latin language. Okay, it wasn't created by the Latin language. Okay, and where is the breakdown of Negrita actually? Because that's actually massively important. Okay, Negro comes from the river Niger. Okay, Niger found its way into Latin, as I said, and because the people in the region were dark-skinned, Niger, Nigra or Nigrum became to mean black. Negro, Negrita or Negrita means the people of the Great River. So black and colored, like white, on the other hand, are European terms. Ethiopian and more popularly used to describe the so-called blacks until the 1500s. Shakespeare uses the word Negro only once, and he uses it synonymously with the word Moor. Africa comes from the ancient Egyptian language of Medunetia, from Afruka or Ka-Africa, the land of Kafrir. Fact number 2. Benjamin Benneker, a Negro astronomer, made the first clock made in America in 1754. And we all know, being from the UK, that the Big Ben in London is also a tribute and honor to the black African astronomer Benjamin Benneker. So hail up him there. Fact 3. George Washington sent a Negro slave to Barbados to be exchanged for a hogshead of molasses, a cask of rum, and other goods and other good old spirits in 1872. That's blatantly a mistake, so my apologies, gang. And for the proof of that, you can see George Washington's very own writings, which have been published, and you can see them on page 211. Fact 4. The Negro was the first artist, and the oldest drawings and carvings yet discovered were by the Negro peoples over 15,000 years ago in southern France, northern Spain, Palestine, South Africa, and India. The drawings are on rocks, the carvings are on bone, basalt, and ivory. Which fact shall we go with real quick there? Which proof? I think there's one on the next page. Dr. Venu says that the Grimaldi race is clearly a Negro one. The skeletons of the 2 Negroes of the Grotte des Enfants are complete and in a state which permits the describing of their characteristics with certitude. And that's in a report by a French paper, which I'm not going to profess to be able to pronounce. I don't speak French, so my apologies there, fam. But of course, you can type that into Google and find it at any time. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can actually see the cavern or the cave that it was found in, and to the left of it, you can actually see the skeleton as well. But I believe that we are going to see some more of that later on. So let's keep it moving. Fact 5: Beethoven, the world's greatest musician, was without a doubt a mulatto. He was given the name and called the Black Spaniard. His teacher, Joseph Haydn, who was also the person who wrote the Austrian national anthem. The proof for this would come out of a document which is called The Man Who Freed Music by R.H. Schauffler on page 18. Beethoven's family came from Belgium, who had been ruled by the Spanish for centuries, who had a large number of Negro soldiers in their armies there. In short, the general description of him, even down to his frizzy hair, fits that of an Afro-American or West Indian mulatto. In the South, Beethoven would have had to ride the Jim Crow car. That's J.A. Rogers busting a little joke with us there. So yes, Beethoven, arguably one of the world's finest musicians and composers, was a mulatto person. Fact 6. The Grimaldi race lived in Europe as late as 12,000 years ago. 2 complete Grimaldi skeletons are in the Museum of Monaco near Monte Carlo. Abundant traces of their culture have been unearthed in southern and central Europe. And again, like I mentioned very briefly before, these are some of the sculptures and some of the culture and some of the artifacts which were excavated from their time in southern and central Europe. There's 2 full skeletons, supposedly a mother and a child. What Griffith Taylor says, though, very quickly, he says next in order in Europe would seem to be the Negrito race, of which more and more evidence is accumulating every year. We may label the 4th stratum Negroid. These people must have been abundant in Europe towards the close of the Paleolithic era, and that's from a book called Environment and Race on page 223, published in 1927. I just want to point out as well, the small figurine that we can see in the bottom here, on the left, just next to my head top, is the Venus of Willendorf, and as you can see, it's a deity fully representing that full fertilitous African body there. So I just want to point out that the woman has always been something which African people or melanated people have always cherished and honored. Fact 7. Cheops, aka Khufu, a Negro, built the Great Pyramid, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It is 451 feet high and has 2.5 million blocks of granite, each 2.5 tons, covering 13 acres, and it took 100,000 men 30 years to build and was completed circa 3730 BCE. Remember, again, we have to understand that the information which he had at this period of time was contemporary, and he only had what he had, so we have to respect that level of knowledge at that period of time. We now know that the pyramids go much further back than the era of time of Kemet and could be dated as far back as 10,000 years. But the proof that comes with it is Herodotus also states as well, very distinctly, that the people of Egypt and the Egyptians had black skins and were woolly of hair. Fact number 8. The river Ganges, the sacred river of India, is named after an Ethiopian king of that name who conquered Asia as far as the river. I'll read through the proof very quickly. But of all the kings of Ethiopia, Ganges was the most famous, of who, with his Ethiopian army, passed through Asia and conquered as far as the river Ganges, to which he left that name before being called Chiloris. Fact number 9. Negroes lived in America for thousands of years before Columbus. Central American monuments show numerous carvings of them as gods. When Columbus came to the New World, Negroes had been crossing from Africa to South America, a distance of 1,600 miles. The first white men to reach the American mainland tell of seeing Negroes. Columbus, who visited South America, said that he had heard of them there. Like I said, we already know from this day and age that black people existed on every single continent. It wouldn't surprise me if we found them in Antarctica. But one of the pieces of evidence that we can look at is Professor R.B. Dixon says in Racial History of Mankind, page 400 to 449, in a short essay, that he emphasizes the fact that there was an early Negro strain in Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Central America. Fact 10 is that the Negro provided and proved to be physically fitter than the white man. For every 100 physically examined, the ratio of colored men found to be physically qualified for general military service was substantially higher than the ratio of white men by just 5%, namely 74.6% against 69.71%. Ultimately, what we're saying here is that people were more physically fit and more able to serve in military combat. However, I feel like this could have been a way of Europeans draft dodging in this period of time. Who knows? But the proof of this was found in the Provost Marshal General's Office second report on the operations of selective service systems, December the 20th, published in 1918. Fact 11. The Afro-American illiteracy rate is 3 times higher than the American one. Nevertheless, when certain states are matched against other ones, there is a surprising comparison. For instance, the Negroes of California, Minnesota, New York, Nevada, South Dakota, Oregon, Washington are less illiterate than the native whites of white parentage in Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, and New Mexico, New York, Minnesota, Oregon, and South Dakota. Negroes of these 7 states are less illiterate by 100 to 400% than the foreign-born whites of these states, save one. Very, very short. I mean, the statistics are there for you to be able to just take a quick screen print or a note of there below. But what they were saying is, when you looked at the stats collectively, it looked like black people were in a worse condition. But when you compared the states state by state, it turned out that black people were actually performing or actually outperforming white people. Fact 12. 2 centuries ago, Negroes of South Africa and the Northern Europeans practiced a form of cannibalism which was strikingly similar. Of the vital organs slain foes, the Negroes made a multi or a charm against evil. Sometimes they ate the heart of the brave man, believing that it gave an added courage. The Europeans would roast or dry the bodies of hanged criminals. Of these they made mumia, or a medicine for internal and external use, which was supposed to have peculiar curative charms. In 1683, when the Germans defeated the Turks at Offen in Switzerland, thousands of them surrendered. Turks were treated in this manner. A German surgeon who was present wrote in a journal, none were given grace, all were massacred, and in most cases they were skinned and the fatty parts were roasted and the genitals were cut off, dried and put into big sacks. And of this they made precious mumia. Regular cannibalism existed in Germany as late as 1650. The proof for this can be found here. Obviously, take your screen print. Which one will I point out? A certain bailiff called Schult reported in 1643 that the men were being caught in snares and regularly roasted, and that's in a book called Race and Civilizations on page 256. And also as well, not to seem biased, of course, black African people did do this at some point. Ethiopians of that time also used to make mumia of their captives and their criminals, which was also in Purchas's book called Race, Pilgrimage. Fact 13. The founder of the city of Chicago was a Baptist called Pont de Seville, a Negro in 1779. And we know this because we can actually find statues of his bust in Chicago. Fact 14. For 2,232 years, human beings have been trying to reach the top of the world. Thousands of lives and millions of pounds or dollars were lost in an attempt to do this. On April 6, 1909, Matthew Henson, a New York Negro, was the first of a party of 6 to do so. He is now, in 1943, the only human being alive to have stood there. The first Arctic explorer was supposedly Pythes, a Greek who perished in an attempt to do so in 325 BCE. The proof is, first of all, from his own diary, A Negro at the Pole, published in New York in 1912. It's also published in the Hamptons magazine in 1926. Fact 15. George Washington Carver of the Tuskegee Institute, one of the world's greatest agricultural chemists, was awarded the Roosevelt Medal in 1939 for a distinguished service in the field of science. From the peanut, Carver extracted 285 products, and from the sweet potato, 118. Dr. Carver was born a slave. Thomas Edison once actually offered him a large salary to take on a project at one of the Edison laboratories, but Carver denied and refused to do so that he could continue doing his work that he began with Booker T. Washington at the Tuskegee Institute. And we can find the proof of this in the A.H. Merritt's work From Captivity to Fame, which is a biographic work on Dr. Carver. Fact 16. The characters of the Bible are largely Negroes. The Jews, who were supposedly slaves to Egypt for 430 years. Of them, only 70 went into Egypt with Jacob, and the Bible states that 60,000 men left with Moses, which, according to Haushofer, meant that a total of 3.154 million, including the women and children, actually left. For such a large number to have left, mixing with the Egyptians who were black must have taken place on a large scale. About 12 million Negroes who were brought into the New World through slavery. Imagine how much of their original colour and culture which the latter would take with them should they return to Africa. You realise how much of the original Jew remained in only those 70 Jews after 4 centuries. Tacitus, the Roman historian of 90 CE, says that Romans of this day popularly believed that the Jews, which were abundant in Europe, came from Ethiopia, the land of the blacks, and the present white colour of the European and American Jew is likely due to the same causes as the fair skin and straight hair of the large number of Negroes. The Bible classes the Ethiopian and the Jew together. Are ye not the children of Ethiopia upon me, O children of Israel, said thee the Lord? Chaldea, the land in which the Jews originated, was also a Negro land, hence Abram might have been also dark. I'll point out at this point very, very bluntly and clearly, again, we're dealing with J.A. Rogers' ability to access information at that period of time. We all now know, much more, or have access to much more than what J.A. Rogers did at the time. But what he's actually explaining in the fact here is that he says that the original Jews were black people on the basis that they would have came into Egypt, such a small number, already being black people because they come from Chaldea, a black land, but leaving in numbers of 3 million people means they would have had to have mixed massively. Okay, and here's some other facts which you can go in on. Tacitus's book in History of Mankind, volume 2, page 246. Fact 17. The black Jews of India are not permitted to enter the same synagogues as the white ones, nor bury their dead in the same cemeteries. The proof for this is the black Jew of India are kept at a respectable distance and not permitted to enter the same synagogues as the whites, nor bury their dead in the same cemetery, which is from M. Fishberg, the Jew. What I want to point out as well is when we're talking about the black Jew in this context here, we're not talking about Jew as a religion, we're talking about a racial description or a phenotype, a physical description. And in this context here, the black Jew is talking about the Dravidian or the dark Indian of India, who follows the Hindu religion. Not many people know that the Hindu religion is very much a racist caste system. Okay, it has the Brahmin at the top, which is the white person. Okay, so in this context as well, the white person doesn't literally mean white European, it means the lighter person, the Brahmin, the enlightened one. Okay, so you have the Brahmin at the top, and at the very bottom you have the Jew, or what is considered to be the untouchable. Okay, so the untouchables today are not allowed to, in India, mix with anybody of a higher social standing or higher social class, but you can do your own research into that. Fact 18. Aben Ali, an African Negro, was a private physician of Charles VII, the King of France, between 1403 and 1465. When the king fell dangerously ill at Toulouse, Aben Ali was sent for, and Aben Ali cured him. Thereafter, the king made him a member of his suite. The proof for that is the Negro Dr. Aben Ali, attached to the suit of King Charles VII, had the glory of curing King Charles when he was still at Dauphine. And I can't read that name there, but that is the source that you can find that information at. Fact 19. Eugene Chen, one of the most dynamic political figures of the present century and Ministry of Foreign Affairs for China, 1927, was born of Chinese Negro parentage in Trinidad, West Indies in 1878. He was also the secretary to Dr. Sun Yat-sen, the first president of China. You can see his picture there, and we can also find the proof in the personal history of Eugene Chen, pages 205 to 207, which was published in 1935. Fact 20. Anna, A Negro servant girl of Calaviccio in Italy, a wife of a white mule driver, became the concubine of Pope Clement VII. Her son Alessandro, born 1511, became the reigning Duke of Florence and married Margaret, only daughter of Emperor Charles V, ruler of Germany, in the Netherlands, Austria, and Spain in 1536. So this is just a little bit of more information about Moorish royalty. The proof of this is found in the Antique Rings and Gems, page 326-827, and also found in the painting in Torino, volume 13. And you can also see at the bottom there, if you pause, you can actually copy those links there and read the Medici Diary as well. Thomas Jefferson, third president of the United States and father of the so-called Declaration of Independence, was the father of a large number of mulatto children. His father protested loud and long to no avail, and Patrick Henry, who was another signer of the document, had a Negro child as well called, well, you can read that there for yourself. I can't pronounce that. Jefferson's favorite concubine was the famous Black Sal, who had to take his white daughter to France. Fact 22. In 1787, while a party of 351 freed Negroes was aboard a ship in Portsmouth, England, en route to Sierra Leone, West Africa, the authorities brought on board 62 white women, prostitutes, and other of whom the government wished to get rid of, and married them to as many men and sent them off to be the future mothers of the colony. Utting says that they sailed in 1787 from Portsmouth with 60 white women whom the government wished to exile. The latter were made drunk and carried on board and married to the Negroes without their consent being asked, and that's from F.A.J. Uttering's Sierra Leone, page 81. Just want to point out that Europeans sometimes will throw their own people under the bus. It's called collateral damage. Fact 23. Countess de Buenos was related by marriage to Napoleon. She was married to a full-blooded Haitian Negro named Castaigne, who was a member of the French Convention between 1792 and 1795. And the fact there is part of a report which is in French, which I can't read, which, as I'm sure you can tell by now, I'm not good at reading French. Fact 24. Nearly all of the ancient gods of the Old and New Testaments and New World, were black and had woolly hair. Buckley says, from the woolly texture of the hair, I am inclined to assign the Buddha of India, the Fua of China, the Haha of Japan, and Quetzalcoatl of the Mexicans the same, indeed an African or rather a Nubian. In the Bible, God or the ancient days is described as having hair like pure wool, and the earliest statues of Virgin Mary and Christ in Europe as found as north as Russia were black and Negroid. And Godfrey Higgins in the Ancapalis, volume 1, page 286 says, we have found the black complexion or something relating whenever we have approached the origin of nations. The Alma Mater, the goddess of Multimamia, and the founders of the oracles of Memnon, and the first idols were always black. Venus, Jupiter, Apollo, Bacchus, Hercules, Astaroth, Adonis, Horus, Apis, Osiris, Amemnon. In short, all in wood and stone, deities were black, and they remained how they were made, even in the remote times. And here's another page of origins. E.A. Wallace Budge says that the earliest Egyptian gods, such as Ptah, the father of the gods, Bes, the god of war, mischief and comedy, originated in Sudan, the land of the Negroes. And he said that in Fetish to the Gods in ancient Egypt, pages 254 to 255. Fact 25. Psalms that read like those of the Bible were written by a pharaoh, Amenhotep IV, better known as Akhenaten, the heretic king of 1300 BCE, or more than 400 years before David was born. Akhenaten, who was the father of Tutankhamun, was extremely Negro in type, and he was called the most remarkable of pharaohs. And for the proof of that, you can actually see the comparison of one of the Psalms of Akhenaten with the 104th Psalm of the Bible, and you can see the work of Arthur Weevil in the Life and Times of Akhenaten, page 143, 135. Jeez. Alright then, so that brings us to the end of the first part of 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, as told by J.A. Rogers. I also just want to remind you and bring your attention to the fact that although my version of 100 Facts About the Negro is not going to be released until the 12th of December, you can go to my Patreon account, which is on the side there, and you can actually get yourself a pre-order copy. I'm going to be releasing them 12 days before the book is released, so you can actually get your copy in advance. And also don't forget, I'm going to be doing the book launch at the museum tour, which you can find more information about on the Patreon account too. So I'm going to just say peace and more powers, Dua, which means thank you. Uncle Joss and Neb, life, prosperity and health. Big Black African Power, thank you for your time and attention. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please like, share and support, subscribe to the account, and go and tell your friends and your family about the work that we're doing with We Will Rise Together. So She'em Hotep, which means go in peace.